Welcome to Joining Tables Part 2, and in Part 1 we looked at how to find this data and pointed out a couple of the things, table aliasing and so forth, on doing this join. But let me say one thing about the table aliases. It looks as though you're using this variable A right here before you actually declared it here, if you will. And if you're a procedural programmer, that's going to mess with your mind. Don't worry about it, because what's happening is as TransX SQL, before it actually executed this query, it went through and it basically validated to make sure that all these objects were there, like the authors table, the title author table, and the titles table. And once it saw that, it also saw that we were aliasing it, and so it went ahead and created that alias, and then when it came through and ran the query, it saw it. So that's just a kind of a little T-SQL thing that'll somewhat confuse some people, especially if you have a programming background. But what I really want you to see here is the complexity of this simple query. Sounds simple. I just need a list of the authors and the titles that they have. We had to do a three-table join to get that. And we had to do a three-table join because we normalized the database. We didn't, but whoever designed this database normalized it this way. Now, to denormalize it wouldn't have been nearly as efficient to store it, but this is a great example of thinking about how the database is going to be used. We could go back now and do an order by title, and notice when we run it now, we'll come back and we're actually in alphabetical order on the titles now, so we can look at those things up very easily. We could just as easily done author's last name. But look at what has to happen here, and this is predominantly because of normalization. And this is why I was talking about way back at the beginning of the course that your second or third database design will really be a good one, because you'll just kind of learn based on how this database is going to be used when you should normalize and when you shouldn't. Now, should this be normalized this way? Well, it all depends. If this is the predominant query in this database, then we might want to look at a little bit different structure. But if we're spending our days pulling queries about authors and titles, don't know that it's a great idea to do a three-table join on every one of those, especially as we get more and more data in here. Now, get a bunch of database developers in a room and ask a simple question about this normalization, and you're going to get a lot of different answers. But again, you're going to have to balance normalization with how the database is going to be utilized, how often it's going to be updated, and so forth. So if we're trying to pull this data out really quickly, often, then we might want to denormalize. But on the other hand, if this data is being updated constantly or changed or edited somehow, then we're probably better off denormalizing. So in this two-part video on joining tables, what I've wanted you to see, first of all, for those of you who are kind of new to the game here, how to write a three-table join. You're always joining two tables at a time. We joined the authors to the titles on the common column AUID. Then we took that result set and then basically joined titles where the title authors, we joined basically titles to title author where the title ID column is the same on both. So as you can tell, these can start to get a little tricky to follow sometimes, and it's not unusual at all to get a little confused when you're building these. You just have to map it out and think it through and then get it down and test it and get it working. This is a good example of something that should be in a stored procedure, and we should just jump up here and stick this into a stored procedure. We'll talk about that later, and you'll understand the reasons why. But that's the very basics on a table join, and really good example of how joining tables is a direct result of the level of normalization that you've applied to your database and why you should think about it from both sides.